Now you've probably heard the little fairy tale about with a magic wand you just touch the toad and it turns into a prince. Well, evolution is even more fantastic. They say this, that over millions of years ago there were worms living at the bottom of the oceans and the seas. But through millions of years and some favorable accidents, some of them changed into fish. More favorable accidents and more millions and millions of years, some of them changed into amphibians, as a frog. With more favorable accidents and millions of years, some of them changed into primates, then into chimpanzee, and finally into our professor of biology.
Species which are extant, meaning they exist today, did not miraculously evolve from other species that are extant. Evolution is not depicted as a ladder of increasing complexity with humans on top, but it's seen as a dense bush with many diverse branches leading back to our common ancestor. However, some extant species, like worms, do closely resemble some of the earlier forms, perhaps explaining some of the confusion.
Now, for evolution, millions of years is indispensable for by chance happenings that this evolutionary process can take place. Obviously, if I had a worm here and say that at the end of my talk this would be a professor of biology, you say you're making fun of the biologist. But if I say over a period of millions and millions of years the worm became a professor of biology, you say, oh, that's quite believable.
This argument is specious at best. Millions of years are not indispensable to evolution. It's simply the amount of time life took to develop. Species change can take place in relatively few generations if selection is sufficiently strong, as proven by man's domestication of the wolf.
Anyway, let's take a look at some clocks. One of the first clocks that we have is the delta at the end of the great river Mississippi by New Orleans that empties out into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, those in search of oil have drilled both in the Gulf of Mexico as well as into the continental USA, which means into that landmass which comprises the delta. Now they observe what is deposited dirt, what is virgin dirt, as they drill down into the ground. And so from that we can know how extensive was the delta, how deep it was, how much dirt is deposited there. Also we can measure how much water is flowing and sediments bringing. I read one figure that some 30,000 tons of dirt are brought down every hour. And so with those things put together, we find that the whole delta, this is what a delta looks like. It's when a river flows into a larger body of water. The water slows and the sediments it carries begin to accumulate, forming that landmass called a delta. This whole Mississippi River delta could have been formed in 6,000 to 10,000 years. Now, mind you, they don't take into consideration that there had been a worldwide flood, after which maybe half of that delta earth had come down in the first 100 years or so. It indicates a young earth.
It indicates no such thing. Sediment deposition rates show the Mississippi Delta was formed about 6,000 years ago, shortly after the sea level stabilized after the glaciers melted 10,000 years ago. But what does this prove? It proves that the Mississippi Delta is younger than 6,000 years. Who said the Mississippi Delta was present at the creation of the Earth?
What is the oldest living thing on Earth today? Please, no family jokes or things of that nature.
Ha ha.
The oldest living thing is called the bristlecone pine. It's also called the Methuselah pine. It is about 4,300 years old. Whoa, what happened 4,300 years ago? Well, according to the Bible, there was a worldwide flood that completely revamped all the real estate. Plants, animals, and people began to populate the earth about 4,400 years ago. Interesting. How come we don't have anything living older than 4,300 years, older than the time of the flood?
King Clone, a creosote bush ring in the Mojave Desert, is 11,700 years old. It's fun to talk about really old plants. What does any of this have to do with the age of the Earth?
Also, we have the giant sequoia trees of California. Here's a picture of one that's over 300 feet tall, some 21 feet wide at its base. Plenty of room to cut a hole and fit a car in there. And they're about 4,000 years old.
The oldest known giant sequoia is only 3,200 years old, based on ring count. but we should be used to fudge numbers by now.
Now, what's the reason that the bristlecone pine and the sequoia trees are so old? Two reasons. One is their resistance to plant diseases, as well as their resistance to forest fires. Indicates a young earth.
Not sure how their resistance to forest fires and plant diseases indicates a young earth. Logic is apparently not a required feature of creation science.
Another clock that indicates a young earth is the world's population. A few years ago, we passed above 6 billion people in the world. We want to make a calculation backwards to find out how much time will it take to have 6 billion people alive on the earth. Again, I propose an average number of 150 years to duplicate the living population on the earth. Again, I realize there's times it takes more time than that, times it's taken less time than that, but to get an idea. So we start out with 6 billion people, count back 150 years, and take half of that number, which is 3 billion. We add another 150 years and take half of the previous figure. Keep adding 150 and take a half. As we scroll down to the bottom of the page, we see that after 4,500 years, there would only be 5.5 people left. Whoa! What happened 4,500 years ago? Well, according to the Bible, there was a worldwide flood that cleared the whole earth, and only 8 people survived. Just think, with 8 people and 4,500 years of time, we could have the Earth's population today of over 6 billion people. It agrees with what the Bible says, indicates a young Earth.
Again, with made-up figures pulled out of the nether regions of his lab coat, he reaches his preconceived notion. Population growth has little to do with maximum reproductive capability. Populations are dependent on the carrying capacity of the environment. When the carrying capacity is reached, the population is held stable, as it was for much of man's history before technology allowed us our recent exponential growth. As a comparison, if bacteria were allowed their unlimited reproductive capability, they would fill every square inch of the earth in less than a week.
Now, from the side of evolution, we have this picture from National Geographic, which is of a Homo sapiens. Man knows. And they say it's 92,000 years old. Now, let me tell you something. When we find a fossil, any place, I promise you not a single fossil comes out with a tag that says, "Hi, I'm the fossil of a Homo sapiens, and I'm 92,000 years old." No, people, according to their beliefs, put the names and their dates.
Of course, the beliefs used are the foundational concepts of physics, chemistry, and biology, rigorously tested by experimentation and backed by 1,000 years of evidentiary findings, which I'm pretty sure we'll have to explain to Mr. Pendleton shortly. Who was this guy's chemistry teacher anyway?
As we'll see in a little bit, a lot of the dating methods are thoroughly unreliable.
Not as reliable as made-up numbers based on conflicting genealogies? Or is it they do not reliably give the preconceived answers that you want?
But let's be generous. Let's say the first human couple lived 45,000 years ago. One man, one woman, modern human beings. Year 0. 150 years go by, now we're 4. We go to 300 years, now we're 8. Follow out that calculation, how many would we be today? Wow, we'd be standing chest against back, shoulder against shoulder, arms upon legs upon shoulders, miles up in the air, covering the whole surface of the earth. We are not that many people. We do not find that many human artifacts, remains, or bones. It indicates a young earth, just like the Bible says.
Again, carrying capacity determines population, not maximum reproductive potential. A 5-year-old could understand. Live up to the lab coat, buddy.